Hello YouTube. Today I want to talk about the impact of global cooling on our planet and what it can do to mankind. And since Russia is the area of my expertise, I want to let you know what happened in Russia centuries ago. It was about the Little Ice Age, the most terrible time in Russia. During the times of troubles in my motherland. We're talking about the coldest years. The Little Ice Age in Europe occurred at the end of the 16th, beginning of the 17th century. The catastrophic events of the Little Ice Age in Russia began in the 4th year of the reign of Boris Godunov. From 1601 to 1603, snow and rain fell in Moscow in the summer, and frosts began early in the autumn. The country was struck by a series of crop failures, which went down in history as the Great Famine. The cold snap of 1601, in addition to general climatic reasons, is also explained by the eruption of the Huayna volcano in February of that year in South America, which became the strongest volcano eruption in history at the time. It is possible that at the same time there was an eruption of the Billy Mitchell volcano on the island of New Guinea. The cloud of ash and sulfur dioxide released into the atmosphere reduced the amount of sunlight falling on our planet. In general, the temperature on the planet in 1601 decreased by 1 to 2 degrees Celsius. In the spring of 1601, the sky was darkened by a thick darkness, and the rains poured for 10 weeks incessantly, so that the villagers were horrified, according to the Russian historian Nikolai Karamzin, and there was much to be horrified about. The loss of the crop was provoked by the disaster, which the Russian land has not seen for a long time. According to eyewitnesses, people on the streets of Moscow, lying on the ground, were grazing grass like cattle. Hay was found in the mouth of the deceased. People who fell down and died right on the city squares. Robberies, murders, and cannibalism have become commonplace. According to the so-called New Chronicle, men left their families and died outside of home looking for food. They ate dog and dead meat, tree bark, water roots, and even human excrements. The guests began to be afraid to stay in hotels, so that they would not be strangled and be used as meat for pies. In winter, impoverished people began to freeze in droves on the roads, and the period at that time, from 14th to 17th century, is called by climatologists the Little Ice Age. For Russia, which is separated from the rest of Europe by the colder isotherm of January, these centuries have become a time of real test of strength. In Europe, the small ice age was preceded by the medieval climatic optimum of the 10th through 13th centuries. At that time, the heyday of Kievan Rus kingdom came about. In the 15th century, a terrible famine in Russia associated with climatic changes took place in the years 1435 to 1438. At that time in Smolensk, for example, mothers ate their children, and the dead lay right on the street where they were eaten by predatory animals. Presumably, the cold snap in Europe began due to the slowdown of the warm current of the Gulf Stream. Since that time, periods with severe winters have become frequent, which ruined the harvest and contributed to the emergence of famine. In Russia, which had just recovered from the Mongol Batu invasion of the hordes, in the 14th century, chronicles record a series of rainy and frosty years. Every life was bitten by frost, and there was a fierce high cost. For 5 hryvnia for a zobnitsa, that's a grain measure, This high cost remained for a long time. That was said, the entry was in the Pskov Chronicle in the year of 1314. By the way, the same time crop failures were experienced in France. As for the famine in the Russian kingdom, it is worth saying that there was a lot of grain in the princely, boyar, and monastery storages, but the owners were in no hurry to sell it, waiting for the price of grain to rise even more. Here are the words of an eyewitness of those times. There were more grain reserves in the country than all the inhabitants could eat it in 4 years. The barns of the noble lords, as well as in all the monasteries and many rich people, were full of bread. Some of it had already rotted from lying there for many years, and they did not want to sell it. Grain speculation was the strongest blow to the commoners. Russians should not forget about the scarcity of the soil, the harsh climate, and other negative factors that are characteristic of both the Russian kingdom and for many the great famine in the Russian kingdom. Climatic disasters provoked the strongest famine in the Russian lands. Many landowners had to give the peasants a free hand to get rid of the extra hungry mouths. Some of the nobles simply drove out their slaves or the serfs without giving them the document bestowing freedom, in order to regain at least some of the surviving peasants at the end of the famine. To feed themselves, hungry serfs got together in gangs, engaged in robbery on the highways. The uprisings of Hlopo Kossolap, or in English Cotton Clubfoot, robber ataman or Cossack leader, began, and he operated very successfully not far from Moscow. Active efforts of King or Tsar Boris to save the starving population could not completely correct the situation, despite the distribution of bread from the sovereign's granaries. Basically, a minority of people received food. Cash distributions from the treasury also did not help. In the market, by 1603, the price of bread increased tenfold. Many peasants moved to Moscow, where, at the behest of the Tsar, money was given out of the treasury, and food was given out from the warehouses. Boris Godunov believed that such assistance would help commoners survive the famine, but such measures were insufficient. Moreover, a significant part of the money and food was simply stolen. According to the data that have come down to us, more than 100,000 people died in Moscow during just the 2 hungry years. Although there was the royal help, it did help to save many lives, but still it wasn't enough. Famine was the start of epidemics. And there is nothing surprising here. After all, starving people caught and ate dogs, cats, mice, and rats, and some even ate manure or feces. Cases of cannibalism were increasingly recorded. It happened that families ate their deceased relatives and neighbors. However, there is really nothing to reproach King Godunov with. He really did everything he could, seizing grain supplies from the rich and sending grain carts to the farthest corners of the country. He also made sure that all the victims were buried. Every day, hundreds of dead people were picked up everywhere on the streets by order of the Tsar and taken away on so many carts that it was scary and creepy to look at it, wrote the German author Konrad Busov in the Moscow Chronicle, based on personal memories. Only in the capital, the number of deaths ranged from 100 to 500,000 people, but it is unknown how many peasants and townspeople died in the provinces. For natural reasons, the famine stopped, but its consequences were felt for a long time. The people's distrust of the government of Boris Godunov strengthened, which provoked the subsequent era of impostors and foreign intervention. That's what we call the times of trouble in Russia. Bloody and, in a way, fascinating history, but it wasn't fascinating for the people who lived there. Of course, at the time they did not know that the famine was provoked by the eruption of a distant volcano. The European nobility and commoners were firmly convinced that this punishment was sent for sins. Well, in the Russian kingdom, the Tsar, the king, was blamed for the famine. Boris Godunov, who himself took the throne out of rank. Actually, he was one of the smartest Tsars in the history of Russia, by far. Well, in the future, the influence of the little ice age on the climate in Russia continued, but without such catastrophic consequences. The Great Famine is a terrible disaster that befell the Russian kingdom. The Great Famine aggravated the time of troubles, and basically it sent hundreds of thousands of people to their graves. Many towns and villages were depopulated. The Russian kingdom barely managed to survive the time of troubles and recover from a terrible famine. Russia barely survived this period, very difficult period, but it did survive. We today live in the times of volcanoes becoming active, and I described it in my videos in this channel, and I will delve into this subject again, especially when I describe the more than strange Mountain Shasta in California. I think we should take heed of what's going on. It's not the bovine flatulence or autumn emissions that can impact the earth quickly and deadly. There were no automobiles in the medieval Europe, but there were volcanoes. Of course, we have to control the damage we have inflicted on our planet and stop the destruction of the oceans and the atmosphere, the soil and the environment. But it has to be done by all nations. Otherwise, it's just but empty talk, and there is too much of it. The Earth can and will demonstrate its deadly surprises, like the slowdown of the warm currents or eruptions of volcanoes can occur. So all we can do is try to get prepared and look at the past. If not for guidance, maybe at least as manifestation of what can happen. Listen, I appreciate your attention to my videos, and I will be putting up more in the future. If you can support my research, please do so. There are links in the description to this channel. And thank you for your attention, and I appreciate if you tell others about my channel and subscribe to it.